Welcome to Lighting the Void.
Broadcasting live from, I was about to say, from the world's most famous beach, from a shack live here in the middle of the Mossy Creek bottoms of Cane Creek, Arkansas. This is Lighting the Void. I'm your host, Joe Root. So we are live on Fringe.fm, KTLK Digital Broadcasting. And I got a special guest tonight. Ryan Gable's here with us. Stuff's about to get deep. It's about to get nasty. It's about to get real. We're about to get down to the truth. That's a must. That's a given anytime Ryan Gable comes on the show. So, hope you're ready. If you can, please make a donation to the Fringe FM. If you love support and have high hopes for what we're doing here, just like I do. I have lots of high hopes for what we're doing here. Let me turn down this Mal P, man. It ain't the music show, man. It's the talk show. It ain't time, Mal P, although I love drugs from Amsterdam. But I don't think we're going to be talking about too much drugs tonight. But here's the thing. Please make a donation, if you can, to the Fringe FM. We need your help. We massively need your help. And for the specific reasons of I'm trying to upgrade stuff here. So I'm trying to get into the video world, but I don't really have a PC that can do it. So I got some extras, but sure enough, this old PC, no matter how much I pet it, tends to break down. So we got to upgrade the PC here to get this stuff going. I'll keep trying it though. You know me, I don't give up. The call-in number for tonight, if you want to call in, is 501-777-5631. So Ryan Gable's here with us at thesecretteachings.info. Used to be a veteran of the Fringe FM. We got his primetime start here, and then he moved to Ground Zero Radio, which we're all very proud of, by the way. I am. And, yeah, it's good to have you, Ryan. I don't know what else to say, brother.
I feel like I'm coming home to my parents or something. They're really proud of me for what I've accomplished. I appreciate you having me back on the show. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about your new book you got out, man. I know you wrote another book. So what's that about?
Yeah. The Garden of Hallucinations book. I've actually published 2 books this year. I did Liberty Shrugged sometime in the spring, summer. And then I just got a feeling that I wanted to write something else. And I wanted to have a small condensed version of Occult Arcana, which, is a very, very large book. It's like a ream of computer paper that you buy at the store. It's big. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to create something a little smaller, a little cheaper for people. And I wrote something called Garden of Hallucinations. And the book focuses, I got the idea for the book, and I think you'll find this interesting. I got the idea for the book looking at a painting of the Garden of Eden. And I noticed that the serpent I already knew that he was half human, half serpent. And I noticed, this serpent has red hair, and serpent's actually kind of female. And so it goes back to the Jewish tradition of Lilith in the Garden of Eden tempting Eve. And when I saw that, I was thinking, because I was studying ayahuasca and altered states of consciousness and their relationship to things like UFO abductions and things like that. And I thought, wait a minute, that's exactly what people see when they take ayahuasca, or a lot of people do. They see this character named Mother Ayahuasca, a serpent on a tree with a female head. And I just started thinking, Garden of Eden, Garden of Hallucinations. The Garden of Eden story is a metaphor. It's not literal, but also it could be an experience that any of us could have if we took, under the right circumstances, the right kind of a substance. And I was thinking maybe the Garden of Eden is kind of a collective experience that people that take those kinds of substances have. Different substances cause different kinds of reactions or different types of visions. Peyote, blue water lily, poppy, ayahuasca, DMT, which we all produce naturally. So anyway, that's what the idea of the new book was. I actually cover Carl Jung and some other stuff about UFOs in the book, and I have a whole section on the end that I think you would really appreciate called Keys of the Mysteries, where I talk about the significance of the human body, the ego, the animal self, and how that relates to the book of Revelation, and how a lot of those apocalyptic Armageddon stories are really things that we each go through in the progress of our lives as we get older.
Right.
So I think it's an interesting book. I think you'd really enjoy it. I got to send you a copy of it still.
Yeah, sounds awesome, man. I think I'm stuck on this idea of Lilith, man. Did I ever tell you that? So I don't know if I ever told you the story, But
did you date a Lilith?
I've dated several. I've dated several Liliths, man. You know, they pretend to be Eve and turn out to be Lilith, right? Yeah, man.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
But no, so listen, I don't know if I ever told you a story, but I had a very sweet girl that used to work here with us, very nice girl, and she was into all the stuff that we did, and she was from Scotland. I mean, I kind of missed talking to her. She was very sweet, but she was into the occult, and this is why I tell people, you know, like, don't dive too deep into it. And I think she might have invoked Lilith or something and ended up going crazy. And it, you know, temporarily said that she had voices in her head that shared my voice in her head. And, you know, like, people don't understand the power of these symbols in their psyche sometimes. So when we go to play with it, it's like when these things happen and they take the rides, and they're like, oh, it's real, I'm going to run from it. And I think that's the perfect time, like when you realize this stuff's real, not that I'm trying to convince you that it is, to see its power, that you should be like, okay, well then if that symbol, like Lilith, is that powerful, then I need to really pay attention consciously to everything I'm taking in, everything, you know.
Yeah, you should. I mean, in my opinion, I agree with you. In my opinion, you should embrace it, not in the sense of honoring it or worshiping it, but you should embrace it in the sense of learning about it and trying to understand it. Because as much as Lilith is evil, she is the tempter of men, the aborter of children, and all of those things. Lilith also has other characteristics. She's not totally pure evil. So, and that goes for, pretty much any deity, god, goddess, even heroes and heroines, in the myths and stories that we tell. Not everybody's totally good or totally evil. We do have completely good and completely evil concepts like God and the devil, but generally speaking, every character has, a good side and a bad side, and that includes Lilith, or call her Lamashtu, or any of the other names that have been applied. So yeah, she's not all evil. She also has I guess you could say, a good side, but she does personify those traits of abortion and child harm. She hunts and hurts children. And of course, the tempter of men. She's basically the first succubus in the mythology.
What's the difference between Lilith and the Jezebel?
The Jezebel?
Yeah.
I think it's probably a very similar concept, because there's so many different names for Lilith, and different cultures have different versions of Lilith. I mean, Lilith is the Hebrew name, from what I understand. That's the Jewish tradition, the mystical tradition. All the other names, you could say Jezebel, you could say Galo, you could say Lamia, which is a vampire, sucks the blood, just like the succubus sucks the semen out of the men. It's pretty vulgar, but that's exactly what it is. And the incubus is the other version, the male version. So yeah, there's all these different names, but it really just represents temptation. It represents destruction of innocence. It's something that is within all of us. Whether you're a man or a woman, you have a little bit of both of those characteristics in you. And it's about learning what those are, like you said, and not running away from them. Because when you open that doorway and acknowledge that those things are real, and then you run away from them, they easily conquer you in a, let's say, an unconscious, subconscious way. If you embrace them and face them head on, then you conquer them. And then you should be able to become a little bit more enlightened as an individual. That's the whole point of all the myths and stories and mystery schools, etc.
Right. Yeah. So I think this is interesting. I wanted to talk to you tonight about symbolism in movies and our society.
Oh, yeah.
It's just something that I know you're really big into. You really like to talk about that. And the thing about it is I personally think that society is like programming us to be a certain way. And I don't want to like scare people, but I think it's trying to drive women to be narcissists and men to be kind of weak. Does that make sense? Like, weak is in the sense of, not, I cried weak, but like weak is in the sense of you're too adaptable. You don't stand for anything. And the more I see this happening, like, the more it freaks me out, because the polarities of everything, to me, is what makes this place beautiful, right? And I think it's all getting screwed up.
Yeah, well, that's a multi-layered idea that you're dealing with there. First of all, when you're speaking about the political side of things, it's not a theory. It's a literal, I guess you could say, ideology. I've talked about it. You know about it. It's called Marxism, or it's just called the demoralization, destabilization, and devaluing of human life in all of its forms to turn everybody against each other. So people hate Jews, people hate Muslims, people hate women, people hate men, and so on and so forth. That's a byproduct of both ideology and a lack of, in my opinion, a lack of whatever people might call God. It doesn't mean religion, but the Pythagoreans called God logic and reason and rationale. And when you get rid of those things in society and fight with each other quite a bit like we do, then things go downhill. So that's like on the political side of things. And it's also the Marxist ideology. But there's also a historical side to this as well. In regard to Lilith, and I think you'll find this really interesting if your audience especially doesn't know this, they'll find it interesting as well. In the old stories about Lilith, she wears a necklace around her neck, and the necklace is made of rainbow. So she wears a rainbow necklace. Now, as opposed to the rainbow being a symbol in the Bible as a promise that God would not flood the earth again, or as a symbol in places like Japan, where it is the bridge that Izanagi and Izanami take to stir the primordial waters and create the islands of Japan. Right. And it's in the Scandinavian myth, the gods use it to come down to earth. So rather than a bridge from heaven to earth, Lilith uses it as a bridge to the abyss. And in all the stories, Roman stories, Greek stories, etc., all across the Middle East as well, you find the story of Lilith and the rainbow in relation to all these other demons. Again, Galo, Mormo, Lamia, and what they represent are men and women, because men embrace Lilith as well. Men that are literally turned into, they become feminine, and women that turn into and become masculine. And there actually are cults in Greece, and there were cults in Greece and Rome. You could actually read about them. I have them in my new book as well, where women would actually pretend to be men. They would wear men's clothing, and not for like artistic purposes. They were like psychotic, and they would bring fake penises around with them and walk around with these fake penises. So you start to think about all that, and it kind of sounds pretty familiar to the types of political things that are going on today. So back to your question, there's certainly an ideology behind what you're saying. And there's even a name, you could call it Marxism, whatever you choose to call it. There's also more of an occult historical angle to it too, where we've seen this kind of thing happen before. When we take God, or we take the concept of the divine out of everything, and we focus strictly on material sciences with no spiritual component, things start to fall apart, and it gives us the kind of world that we are starting to see more and more of. We're also seeing countries push back against that. Countries like Russia have rejected a lot of this, and other countries have rejected it. So I guess that's a positive note, but I hope that makes sense. And I think it relates to Lilith, like we started off the show tonight.
Yeah, I just don't like, so we have to get back to, so I feel like people have, in my opinion, have lost the magical side to them. And I don't necessarily mean sorry about that. I don't mean the woo side. I just mean like more of the faith that there is a metaphysical principle behind the scenes that's working in their favor, right? So it seems like over the past 2 years that got broken down, and now it's all, logic, and we're back to the logic. Logic is great. Stoicism's great. I'm for all that stuff, but I think that itself is any kind of polar situation causes these things in society, right? So if we, for instance, if we were all just open with our emotions and completely woo all the time, that would cause the same effect. It would cause the same effect for people to be like, well, there's just simply no logic. So I don't know. I feel like I've isolated myself again because I'm trying to relate to the world, and I just see it just hyper compounding upon itself in a weird way where it's all just intellectualism, narcissism, and what's in it for me, right? And I don't know, it freaks me out a little bit, just a little.
Well, this is like the idea with transhumanism or posthumanism, right? Where atheists and a lot of scientists, at least conceptually, believe that God made a mistake creating the earth. This is kind of their sacrilege view of it. God made a mistake, so they can fix the mistake and make man perfect. That's kind of the transhumanist, sort of post-humanist model of Yuval Harari and Klaus Schwab and all these guys. But that idea is like ridiculously flawed, I would think, just on the surface, because if God is imperfect and created this imperfect world, then how can an imperfect creation create a more perfect world, even though everything's based on imperfection? It doesn't really make a lot of sense, but that's the arrogance of trying to usurp the authority of the concept of God and trying to replace what we call God's creation with man's creation, which includes eliminating carbon dioxide because they say that's a threat, replacing carbon with synthetics, with silicone, etc. And that's a whole nother subject, but I think it's along the lines of what you're saying. And as a result of that, it causes people to lose their minds, I think, a little bit. Plus, when you're talking about what you're referring to, like the way you feel, I think a lot of that's also caused by social media and access to the internet. I mean, just imagine what it would be like if you look back to like World War II, people had to wait days or weeks to find out what was happening in Europe. Now we get information to our phones updated every 10, 15 minutes about what's happening anywhere in the world. Just imagine if there was that kind of technology during the Cold War. All the threats of nuclear annihilation were bad enough. But imagine if you had access to it 24 hours a day. You get alerts on your phone every 10 minutes. Russians might have launched a missile. Russians might have launched a missile. The Russians get notifications. The Americans might have launched a missile. Get in the bunker. It was bad enough the way that things were, let alone if you had all this technology that constantly warns you of it. My point is it would make you feel probably like things were much worse than they actually were. And I think that's, at least in a positive way, that's actually part of the reason that we feel perhaps the way that we do. That's just my opinion, though.
Yeah, everything. I talk about relationships a lot because this is how we grow. We grow through that. People don't realize this, but the more I study about this stuff, like you can grow so much with yourself. You could do it totally with yourself, but if you want to hyper alchemize, so to speak, relationships is the way to do it, right? This is what, especially if you deeply care about someone, you love them, or it's a friend, family, even some coworkers, right? They'll bring out certain things in you that need to be healed. And yet, this to me, this only happens when real kind of love and connection exists. And to me, that's not what we're being taught. And Sadiya Khan, to me, there's a woman out there her name's Sadiya Khan, and she's one of the only women that I hear talking about this on both ends of the spectrum, men and women. Like, so, and she makes total sense. She was on Tom Bilyeu's show, and that guy, they had a big conversation about it, right? And I think they're both right about what's happening too, because everybody I talk to, they're just, well, I don't relate to anybody. Well, I don't trust anybody. Well, I can't open up. And every time I do, I get smashed on or whatever. And I think, well, that's how it's supposed to happen. You know, the question is, are you growing? Are your relationships getting better? Or are they getting worse? And that's across the board, friends, coworkers, intimacy, right? Because that's where all the growth is going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen in, YouTube channels or politics, to be honest with you.
Sure, I understand that part. I mean, so part of what you're saying is this is not even an opinion. This is a very, I think, observable fact, is a lot of people feel that they can't trust other people. After 3 years of social distancing, everybody's going to make you sick. That certainly contributed to why people don't trust each other. Part of it is also the hyper intensified usage of social media, which is getting worse by the week, by the month, and by the year. And 3 years of obsessive compulsive attention to health probably made us a lot more sick physically and mentally. I'd say that's part of it as well. And then, of course, back to the ideological aspect of this. I mean, if you take a look at the Soviet Union, for example, or if you think about think about Nazi Germany or Mao's China. I mean, even people that were in relationships, perhaps prior to the Soviet Union or perhaps prior to Nazi Germany, people that were in really good relationships, a husband or wife, those relationships could be quickly ended because the state taught you to be suspicious of your significant other. Kids, especially in the Soviet Union, kids were told to spy on their parents, and kids would turn their parents into the state. You literally could not trust little kids. Same thing in Mao's China. the state turns the parents against the children against the parents, and the parents against each other, and the kids against each other. And that's how you maintain control, whether it's a fascist system, communist system, etc. So for me, I look at it as a very historical thing.
Really?
But at the same time, yeah, but I can see what you're saying. It's also a very supernatural, if you will, or spiritual thing as well.
Bro, yeah, it is, because I know at this point so many like good women that are in toxic situations, and so many good dudes that are just getting slapped around, and I would say even physically sometimes, because they're too afraid to let go of, because they, well, what if I let go of this person, then I'm going to be alone. And it's like, well, do you like, I remember I went through that, and I remember you asking me one time, or like, are you a sadist? Do you like this stuff? You remember when you said that to me?
Yeah.
It made me think a lot. It's like, why am I putting myself, why are we putting ourselves in situations that are not good for us, that hurt us? Why? Because we're being taught that that's what we should do. We have to earn everything. We have to earn everything. That includes stuff that should be basically given to you. That I have a big deal with. I don't want to get on a rant about that, but I hope you know what I'm saying.
No, I know what you're saying. And I think part of the issue is if you're not teaching, this is my opinion, this is how I see it. And it's not the whole of the situation, but just a piece of it. Like, I was reading up in the state of Oregon, how they've extended the cancellation, or they extended the suspension of math and reading and writing requirements to graduate high school. Right. And that's supposed to be a positive thing. Well, so that there's other states that have either done that or they're considering doing that. There's a county in Virginia that's doing something similar. They say if you just turn a paper in for school, no information written on it, 50%. You get a 50% just for turning the blank sheet of paper. So obviously that isn't teaching anybody anything except how to. It's not even mediocrity. It's just you don't have to do anything to graduate. And then you add on to that the fact that there's a super quick decline. It's been increasing over the last couple of years, whether it's in the States or it's in Asia, all over the world, declining population numbers. But we keep being told that education's great, the economy's great, and population's increasing, and we're going to not have enough resources, and the planet's going to die, all that stuff. But the statistically things are actually on the decline. And the reason I bring that up is because part of that is not only are we not teaching, I mean, sure, depending on what state you live in, it's the majority where kids are still learning how to read and write and do math, but it's slowly starting to creep into the system where we're eliminating those kinds of things, basic math, basic reading, basic writing. I mean, it's like 82% of African Americans or Black people in schools cannot read or write. I mean, that's a crazy high percentage. That's nationally 82%. White Americans are not much different. It's like in the 70 percentile range. So we're graduating these people that don't know how to read or write, don't know how to do basic math. Population numbers are declining. That's not some doom and gloom thing for me. I'm simply saying that because if we're not even teaching people how to read or write, we certainly aren't teaching people how to do basic things that they need to know how to do in order to live. Yeah. And that includes we're not teaching them how to do things like communicate with others. We're teaching people that you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, there should be classes on that, man. But here's the thing. Anytime a kid brings this stuff up too, if a kid asks a question, I'm not saying all teachers are this way, but there's a system in place where they're not supposed to give their opinions because you're young and dumb and you don't know any better. Right. But the youth is the thing that kind of moves our society the way it is. So if they ask, how should I carry myself? Is that even a thing in school? What's good health? Like, how do I really take care of myself? How do I treat myself and others with respect? What are boundaries? Like, what are my, they have a counselor. When I was a kid, you have a counselor that you could go talk to if you had a problem. And most of the time they were trying to figure out if your parents were beating you or not, so they could turn them in. I think they should have classes on this stuff, man. And I'm probably a little bit too progressive for some people, but I think our ideas of sexuality are overblown to the point of it's nothing but shame. If you feel this way, look this way, or if you it's all messed up. It's polar in the gender stuff for sure. And then it's also polar in the shame side of it too. Like my ideas, the reason why I don't talk about them too much are just because I'm afraid like it's really going to segregate me from society. But I think at the very least, man, we should be teaching our kids how to respect themselves instead of how to love others, respect others. Communication is like, here's the thing. Kids don't lie. Children from the ages of like 1 to 7, unless they're talking about imaginary friends, and that's still an objective subject, don't really lie. And yet somehow or another they're taught, something happens to them as they get older where they realize, well, I have to lie to be able to live in this world. And it's all backwards, man.
Yeah, I mean, idealistically, we could talk about this and say what would be nice if one thing was this way or something was that way. And I mean, whether you're more on the left, more on the right, or you have different views, regardless of that as a listener, I'm sure that you think, everybody has their own ideas about it. But I think we could actually relate this subject practically to the issue of, or not the issue of, but to the subject of like the symbolism in movies. Because that's why movies like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings and even The Hunger Games, that's why they do so well. A lot of people read those books and it's nostalgic. They read Harry Potter as a kid or Lord of the Rings or maybe The Hunger Games as a young adult. And some people see that there's more significance to the story. There's like a message of anti-government message or whatever the case is. And you can interpret it from a conservative or a liberal or some other point of view. But the point is, those movies are powerful and they stand the test of time. And some of the most popular movies ever made, especially Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, because they play on the archetypes psychologically and they are packed with this archaic symbolism. One quick example is the new Hunger Games. I mean, they use the image of Isis in the movie. It's a very powerful image.
Yeah, it is.
It's going to communicate to the subconscious.
So when you say the subconscious, like people think, well, I don't know who Isis is. I don't study Egyptian stuff, so it's not going to affect me consciously. I mean, how do you explain to them that, yeah, it does, right? It still does.
It's a great question. I mean, I'll answer it and then I give you my opinion. Then I'd like to know your opinion as well. I'd say because people for generations and generations, for thousands of years, under different names, different cultures have different terms that they apply to these characters, but Isis is probably one of the most famous. And so I always say that they're kind of like a reservoir of energy. And when you tap into that, you're tapping into something part of the collective unconscious, if you will. And you have generations and generations and generations of people worshiping, lighting incense, doing rituals, praying to these deities. And so they have some kind of power. And plus Isis and all the different gods and goddesses are really just physical, externalized expressions of internal things. So the essence of Isis is in every male and female. Because for example, Isis is the patron of water and childbirth. So every single woman, whether she hates her uterus because she thinks that's progressive or she wants to have a bunch of kids because she thinks that's the conservative thing to do, a woman embodies the essence of Isis, or you could say the symbol of Isis embodies the essence of femininity in all of its forms, right? So that's why it's powerful. And the people that make these movies, I'm sure it's not like 99%. I'm sure it's like 2 or 3 people that are probably hired to do this. Probably writers, especially because they read a lot and study a lot of this stuff, in order to be able to have the imagination to write in the first place. So the point is, though, they write about this stuff and put the stuff in the movies and the images. And that's why you see movies that really know how to incorporate that kind of imagery, like the imagery of Isis or the symbolism of the rose in the new Hunger Games. That's why those movies just do so well. And they get so many people that watch them and enjoy them. Maybe they're good movies as well, but I guess it's an argument of what makes a good movie. There's a lot of different things that make a good movie: good cinematography, good costumes, like Lord of the Rings, good music.
Good story, but it's also characters.
But it's also the story, especially, particularly Lord of the Rings is a good example because that was written. I actually got one of the Lord of the Rings encyclopedias that references everything from the books and shows where it was taken from in mythology. And it's not just made up out of nowhere. it's taken from something that has already been part of human existence for hundreds or for thousands or tens of thousands of years. So that would be my answer to that question. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. But I also wonder too, like we were taught for years that, and I mean years and years and years, especially in the conspiracy world, that, well, they're putting these symbols in movies to program you, to control you. And I mean, I would even see some of these archetypes, especially you could say the mystical or magical archetypes of deep, I guess, back to the old planetary systems in the old days when astrology was just everything. I would see these archetypes come out in everything, everybody's art, everybody's movies. And I'm thinking, well, maybe it's something in the collective, like Jung talks about, that's speaking through us. Like, why does it always have to be, I'm purposefully programming this in my movie so to program you? You know, I think that's not necessarily the case all the time.
That's a really great point. I completely agree with you. And I think when you first get introduced to these ideas, I know for sure, because when I first got introduced to them, I started thinking, oh my God, everything is a program. Yes. I mean, that's why they call it TV programming, right? But
right.
Everything that we watch at movies, TV shows, even music videos, you know, we say they're programs. They program our mind to think a certain way, to view the world a certain way. And they do all that, whether it's intentional or not. Like when you get introduced to any kind of entertainment, any kind of media, you know, it influences the way that you think and the way that you view the world. That's also, you know, the idea of propaganda as well, influences how you see things. But the point is, when you look at, say, when you look at like a movie like The Hunger Games, I don't think that The Hunger Games, and I actually did a whole show on this, Joe, called The Ballad of Sun Gods and Devils, or so, I think that was the name of the show. And I talked about how there's a lot of people online, to your point, that were reviewing the movie saying that it was an Illuminati satanic ritual movie. And I every time I hear that kind of thing, I'm like, what do you mean it's an Illuminati movie? Like, what is that supposed to mean? It's like a devil worship movie. And that's kind of the division for movies. It's like, it's either the best movie ever made, like, oh my God, Frozen is so amazing. Oh my God, Barbie is so amazing. Or it's all Illuminati, all devil worship. And there's not really any room left in between. So my point is, like, when you look at the Hunger Games, you see the transition, and the rose has been a symbol of the Hunger Games for the series, but you see the transition of the rose at the beginning of the movie. It's red, and then there's a yellow rose in the movie, and then there's a white rose in the movie. There's also the imagery of Isis, as I said. The very beginning of the movie shows the Masonic square and compass, which is, of course, the tools that map out the physical world of the Ancient of Days of the Grand Architect, who is personified by the state of Panem. Is it Panem? Panem, I forget the name of the state in Hunger Games, but that imagery is very vivid. And it's not, I don't think it's put there to control your mind. It's put there because it contributes to the story in an unconscious way. Like, really quick, Joe, he has the guy that grows up to become President Snow in the later movies. This is a prequel. So Snow has the red rose, and that's a symbol of initiation. He feels and thinks at the beginning of the movie he's about to be initiated into this powerful position in the state. Turns out that's not the case. Then later he brings a white rose, which is a symbol of purity, to the woman that he's supposed to mentor in the Hunger Games. And then he has a yellow rose when he goes to meet his friend. And the yellow rose is a symbol of friendship. So the significance of that alchemical transformation of Snow's character, it's not just the character development and the psychological way in which, you know, we watch the character develop, we put ourselves into their shoes and we root or we hate that character. It's also the occult aspect of it and what those symbols represent. And there is someone certainly who is knowledgeable in this, who is putting that in the movies, not necessarily to program people, but to probably get our attention unconsciously and it's like almost like a talisman. It draws our attention to the movie. And, well, that's what Hollywood is. They're a bunch of magicians, and hopefully we watch and pay money, and that's how they take our currency and our energy.
Right.
I mean, you could certainly interpret it as negative, and I'm sure there's a lot of that too, but I don't think that it's all negative. I don't think that it's all some Illuminati satanic ritual, but there's a time and place to discuss that as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I don't think it's all, I think it's think it's art. I think that's how art comes out of you, is like there's parts of the soul, like your karma and your dharma, I believe. Like this is kind of like what you're here to aspire to become, which you're trying to figure out through your human body your entire life, or you start to figure it out and you move towards it. And then you have karmic things that you have to like break or learn from. And I don't necessarily think this is some kind of big school that we're here to learn and grow. It could just be we're here to experience stuff and remember ourselves back to where we came from, right? It could just all be about experience. But I do believe, and I was going to ask you this, I don't want to nail you to the wall here with this stuff, but are you starting to, or do you believe that there is a collective unconscious, a field, whatever you want to call it, that carries these archetypes that do connect all of us together?
I think that there's a few ways to look at that personally. And I think intuition is a really good way to look at it, because I think, like for myself, I feel that I have very strong intuition, especially with certain people, both men and women. And it seems to be somewhat selective, or it seems maybe it's unconsciously selective. Maybe I unconsciously turn it on or off, but I feel like intuition is a good way to respond to your question about the collective unconscious. And when I think of intuition, I think, okay, maybe intuition isn't so supernatural per se. Maybe intuition is recognizing patterns in the way that people behave and act, recognizing that some people, they have certain mannerisms, or they do certain things that other people do. And you can kind of pick those up unconsciously throughout your life. And you start to see more and more of the way that certain people behave and certain people act and certain people talk. And that feels like some sort of spiritual, supernatural intuition, when what it really is just, it's recognizing unconsciously body language. It's recognizing, like, how you breathe without thinking about it. Well, it's also your brain trying to survive, picking out patterns and figuring out how people act and interact with each other. So it's not so supernatural when you look at it from that point of view. More to your point in regard to the collective unconscious, I mean, it's a concept, but certainly I think that people, if they are open to it, and it's not a supernatural power, but if you're open to it, you can allow yourself to feel, or you can allow yourself to be part of everything else around you, all the people around you in your community. And in my opinion, I think that in the same way that I interpret intuition as kind of like a non-supernatural thing, I think that the collective unconscious isn't necessarily just this kind of almost supernatural concept. I think it's also something that we can kind of nail down. It's the feeling of familiarity with people. It's the feeling of knowing or having the same kind, like you said about art, like this stuff with the imagery, the symbolism, it comes out in art. People see, and they see the world differently. But in every culture, we still get the same goddesses, the same gods, the same concepts, some of the same stories, some of the same rituals, whether or not societies were directly connected or not. So there has to be something in the collective unconscious, something that humans are seeing, and then in their own artistic way, in whatever culture they're depicting it. But it, call it something different, but it's really just coming from the same place. That's my opinion. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I hear you. So you yourself have never had, but would you consider yourself having any type of mystical or metaphysical experience in your life?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I guess I'm unconventional, because I see, even though I'm saying intuition isn't necessarily supernatural, at the same time, it is supernatural. So for me, it's not that it's a matter of trying to define the non-definable, but, same with UFOs. Like, I think there's a scientific way to look at them. I think there's a psychological way to look at them. I think there's a supernatural way to look at them. I think that they're all just different ways to perceive them. And I think that they're all kind of coming from the same place ultimately. So yeah, to answer your question, like, I see it as supernatural, but I also see it as very explainable and very natural. And I think that both of those ideas can coexist.
So why the hell aren't we learning from our intuition then? You know what What's I mean? That? Like, well, I've had my intuition tell me that, this is like when it's almost like being able to, like your intuitions. I think your intuition has an ability to be able to tap into things that are cycling. So, for instance, if you're caught in a cycle in your life of something that keeps happening over and over again, you know, you could explain that scientifically and psychologically, that I'm seeing these signs and I'm getting a bit of intuitive deja vu here, or I just have this gut feeling this is going to happen, and then it happens. And other people are saying, well, you're manifesting that. You manifested that to happen. Well, I can tell you personally, from my experience, and I've totally void walked with this, is I gave something a try over and over and over and over again, with all kinds of different aspects and things, to tried this, tried that, listen to this promise or that promise, whatever you want to call it, over and over and over again. But my intuition was still telling me this is gonna cycle. It's gonna happen again and again and again and again. And so this is something I'm struggling with. Like, I'm starting to understand the kind of like the cycles of human existence, whether it's individually or collectively, right? This is how we have to grow through these things.
Well, that's like the way that a character develops in a movie, right?
Yeah.
And you can watch that happen in 90 minutes or throughout a trilogy or whatever. And that's the same way that we all develop, right? We go through a transitional process. We have experiences like you're talking about, and your intuition says one thing. And I don't think that there's really, I'm not sure what word to use here. I want to say that there's not a point, but I don't mean that life is pointless. And I don't also want to say that, you know, the whole point is to just develop and grow and learn, because that's really generic and stale. I think that there's probably something that's in the middle of that generic, you just got to learn and grow, and something in the middle there between that and, you know, none of it matters. I don't think that it doesn't matter. And I don't think that it's just like this general generic way of looking at the world. I think that it's probably a matter of how we, you know, what we desire out of life. And it's probably a matter of how we choose to obtain that. And like, for example, like I know, like I can give you an example of myself. Like, I know that if I went to acquire, let's say, an office job working 40 hours a week, or if I was to go just any business, I guess, and try to work 40 hours a week, I'd probably be pretty miserable, considering what I've been able to work on my own for most of my life. But, you know, there would be a lot more certainty in that income, and that would probably attract other people who would have that same level of stability. It would probably attract, I mean, for me, if I was looking for a wife, it would probably attract a woman, because there's like stability in that job, 40 hours a week. It's not dangerous. It's pretty solid. It would probably attract that. Now, despite the fact that personally I would like a wife someday, I know that I also can't do that, because I feel that I'm meant to do what I do with radio and writing. And so does that make sense? Because it's like, I know that other things could attract other forms of energy, but at the same time, I also intuitively feel that what I'm doing with my radio show and with my books is necessary to help people. And so I don't want to stop doing that, even if it's attracting something that I don't want. That's my opinion.
Well, you and I both know that these radio shows attract a lot of things we don't want.
Oh, they do.
I mean, we've had personal experiences with both. We've talked about them both. Like, you're not going to have, I think if any man, well, I don't even know if it's a man or woman thing, because I get inspired. Some women inspire me, right? So I think if a person is doing what they're passionate about, it inspires. You remember when we talked about this on your show, like the like attracts like thing, you know? Mm-hmm. So the idea is,
I must be crazy then, because I'm attracting a lot of crazy people.
Well, no, I've attracted a lot of crazy people too, man, but I'm a little crazy myself, so I get it. But
yeah,
but I mean, honestly, I think when you put out a certain vibration, whether that's a radio show, an art piece, a movie, whatever symbols are in your vibration, whatever authentic thing you put out is going to attract either people that are inspired by it, people that agree with it, or people that are curious about it. And
or
then,
all.
Yeah, or all of the above. And then some of those people might be attracted to you, either via like they want to talk to you, or they're other kinds of attractions. And that's something that I've had to deal with too, that I want the simple things in life when it comes to, I think we all do, right? Like love and career and all this other stuff. And yet, nothing is ever as simple as it seems, right? And I'm still debating on this magic stuff, right? Like I still practice it and I've seen it. Like there's certain things that once you experience and see, you can't unsee or unexperience. But at the same time, like I don't know, man. I feel like we're going through a pretty tough phase right now, even though I don't want to talk about the world's changing or the world ending or anything like that. I just see that vibe. So when I see movies like Fallout that are coming out, or I know that I'm playing that game, to me, that's a reflection of an internal feeling that's going on with people, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that's what drives the pop culture drives reality as much as reality drives the pop culture.
Yeah. I mean, look, I can tell you this though, through the radio show and through the things that I've attracted in my life, and I'm sure you could tell people this too. Like I've learned that there's some things that I really value and some things that I don't, right? Like I really value authenticity and honesty, man. Like that's why you're still my friend after all this time. But also really value, you know, those are the two biggest things, you know, honesty and authenticity to me. Honesty and authenticity. And then just having general empathy for other people. Not, I feel like we live in this world where other people have lost the love. It sounds wooey, but I just feel that way, man. It's like, well, what are you doing for me? Well, then it's none of the mystics taught that stuff. Well, it doesn't serve me, so I'm not going to do
Selfishness.
it. It doesn't even make sense, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I play a song on the station that talks about I'm getting rid of things that don't serve me anymore. But I mean that when you hear that, you should mean that in a sense, like serve your highest good, not serve you like your career, or your pocketbook, your orgasms, or your pleasure, or whatever, right? Like serve you in the sense of what's good for you as far as growth is concerned.
This is something I've talked about in relation to American history because, you know, everybody's heard the statement, America is the land of the free. And people think, and this is what, I was always kind of taught, and not taught, but this is what I've always heard. Well, America is a land of the free. You can do whatever you want. It's like, well, that's not what that idea means. It means that you have freedom from government oppression, generally speaking, but you still have to follow the rules of society in order to have a functioning country, a functioning republic, a functioning civilization. You can't just, real freedom in that sense. The people that say that are really just anarchists that don't want there to be any rules at all. Every man and every woman for themselves. So it's kind of a misconception of what freedom is. What's that?
That's crazy to me. It's not. Yeah, that's like hyper libertarianism to me, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd even call it libertarianism, but I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, what about me and mine, right? It's like what is that movie? Oh, Brother, Where Art Thou? They got this depression on, man. I get to do for me and mine, you know? Like you could take 5 empathetic, honest, authentic people, 5, and do more things in this world with none of them. They could totally be broke, and I believe this, no resources, nothing but themselves. 5 loving, empathetic, authentic, honest people. It could turn their community into a powerhouse if they came together to do it. But that's not what's going on here, right? It's hard for me to explain what I'm trying to say. They don't want you to be that way. When I say they, I feel like I don't know what it is. It's a principality or something that just keeps coming through everything. It's fear is what it is. It's fear.
Well, think back to what we said at the beginning of the show in regard to those demons like Lilith or Lamash too. So really quick, the reason that those demons manifested, or the reason that they were conceptualized in the first place was because, so if a woman was unable to have a child for whatever reason, or she refused, she was considered not so womanly. Now, it would be really stupid to try to judge that based on, modern standards. We're talking hundreds or thousands of years ago, depending on the society. But so, like, for example, in Greece, if a woman couldn't have a child, I mean, they weren't completely uncivil, but a woman that didn't have a child or refused to have a child would be considered more of like a witch, because she didn't want life or she couldn't give life. And maybe the devil was possessing her and preventing her from getting pregnant because a child is the greatest gift from God and all that. And these demons want to abort them and kill them. So it's like it's an idea that led to, like, if a woman again refused or was unable to have a kid, she would be said to be possessed by these demons, and she'd be usually excommunicated from society, or she would be looked down upon. And that's how that idea of that demon or that temptress or whatever you want to call it, that's one of the ways that it was able to progress and develop. And it's all about selfishness and greed and personal pleasure over everything else. And that's something that you can see happening more and more today. I mean, this is the whole this isn't just women. I could say the same thing about men.
Definitely not. No. It's not women. It's not just women at all. I think there's a push towards more narcissism when it comes to, honestly, this is going to sound bad, but there's a more training to become narcissistic when it comes to women. And I got this from that lady that was talking about this, and I'm going to butcher it and piss a bunch of women off when I say it. But Sadia Khan explained it like that. They're being taught that they have to be this way in order to be safe, and to make sure that they date a man that is successful and has money. And yet, if you're a man, I would say this too, like, if you're dating, if that's your idea that I need to become successful and make a bunch of money before I date a good woman, then there's a high statistic that woman's going to cheat on you, right? Because that's what you're there for. So when I say personal resources, both men and women, there's a lot of narcissistic men too, like that show, it was like Naked Attraction. They're so superficial that it's come down to, well, if her feet don't look right, or if her legs don't look right, she's not really worth my time. What? Like, where the hell did this stuff come from? This is all coming from the same people that talk about, personal responsibility, empathy, and all these things online. And yet this is what's being pushed. I just don't understand how it's being pushed based on what's out there on the internet, right? What I mean by that is podcasts and all these other things that seem to promote authenticity and individuality and the lack of superficiality. And yet the shows and the movies, and these, especially HBO, they're still pushing this stuff. It's weird.
So it's not just a female thing or a male thing. It's a societal and a cultural thing. So if you think about, like, what I was saying in regard to women, is that this is a generation where women have been taught more and more that if you were to, disagree with me or not, I'm not saying all women. I'm just saying, like, if you look into pop culture and you look into social media, this is pretty much what's being taught. I'd probably say two solid generations now of independence is getting naked on OnlyFans to make money. That's independence. And hey, maybe you can make money. Maybe you can be independent and do that. This is the generation of, I'm not going to, have children because the planet's dying, or I'm not going to have children because that's what the men want. And it's, that's a whole thing we can discuss. That's what I mean.
Like, it's some kind of evil competition,
it's evil.
Power thing.
This is where those demons came from. This is where the idea of those, but it's the same thing for men too, because, like, there's a bunch, like, I've known people that are like, oh, I want to become a Muslim because I'll get a bunch of wives. And it's like, that's not what Muslims believe. Well, they're allowed to have many wives. It's like, well, actually, historically, the reason that those men would have multiple wives is because there were statistically far more females than there were males. And you were obligated to take care of both of your wives. And if you couldn't satisfy both of them in every way, whether that's sexually or financially, then you got in big trouble culturally. You got in big trouble with. So it wasn't just like, oh, I get to have sex with a bunch of women. These things are much more complicated than we make them out to be. But then, this whole idea is kind of a separate issue, but kind of along the lines of what you're saying. This whole idea that, well, these women are really bad, or these men are really bad, and this is just how people are. It's like, well, we're cultivating that because it's
bullshit, man. Yeah, it's our fault that we're that way.
Yeah. I can tell you from a male point of view, when a woman dresses really scantily, especially when I'm at the gym, I don't want to see that. It's not about body shaming. It's about respect. And this is a place where mutually we should respect each other, especially at a gym where people are already self-conscious. It's not a shameful thing. And it's not a I hate your body thing. I just don't want to see other people's bodies when I'm at the gym. You should, most gyms have a rule. You should dress appropriately. But as a man, personally, I can respect somebody, but generally speaking, how can a person respect another person if that person doesn't respect themselves? Right. This idea that you should respect me, you should do everything for me, but I'm not going to give anything back to you. It goes both ways, and it's completely destroyed relationships. And there's a historical precedent that's been set time and time again for this. This happened in Germany. It happened in many countries. And again, it goes back to a political ideology amongst many other things that leads to the degradation, demoralization, and destruction of civilization. And hopefully we can turn this around before it gets too bad.
Yeah, well, hopefully. But I know you personally, Ryan, right? Do you really have hope for that?
Personally, you want to know my personal opinion? No, I have no hope. But I also know that it's not, don't take my opinion for being the way that you view the world, because if you want to have hope, have hope. But I can, in my personal opinion, I don't think that there's much hope in certain countries. I don't think that there's much hope in America for this to change. I think historically the downward spiral is going to get substantially worse in some places. And I think it's going to, if you read enough history, you'll find out where it's going to go, and it's not a good place. But that doesn't mean that every part of the world and every person is acting like this, because you see a lot of countries that are putting the brakes on this. Even North Korea just said, you got to have more kids. We don't have our population's declining. You got to get married and have kids. Russia's doing the same thing. Japan's doing the same thing. A bunch of countries are doing the same thing. Like, you got to get married and have kids, or the country's going to cease to exist in 100 years. Everybody's going to die out. Even the UN now admits that and acknowledges that if we continue on the trend we're on by 2050, if the trend continues with the elderly population, with people having less and less kids, we'll reach a steep population decline by 2050, as opposed to the world being overpopulated. Will actually be depopulated. And that's what the UN is saying now. And there's certainly a concerted effort to convince people that, all the good things are bad and all the bad things are good. And that's probably what the devil, in whatever form the devil comes in, the devil would probably want you to do. If I were the devil. Last
question I want to ask you before we take a break here is, you mentioned independence earlier, right?
Yes.
So, independence first as a nation was something that we talked about. We also talked about freedom, justice, and liberty for all men, whoever shape, size, color, whatever, men and women. But on a personal level, independence versus codependence, this is, to me, is like a childish thing. Okay. It doesn't matter. So I don't want to piss anybody off, first and foremost, but if you can network with family and friends and you can have a shared goal, that's one thing. But if you become physically, psychologically, or emotionally dependent upon, if you can't get past your parents or your partner, how are you ever going to think that anybody's going to take you seriously when you start talking about, the politics of the world and how bad the world is and all this stuff? For instance, I've had some experiences with codependency on all levels, man. And so I don't feel like I had the right, or even now at the time, to say, well, we have a dependency on this or that, when we can't even become independent from other, things in our life. We've lost that big time, I think, as a society. We have to, first we get independent from our parents, and that's putting away childish things. Then we get independent from society. This is the walk of Christ. The more independent you become, the more you're not going to relate to everything. But then you still have to learn how to love others and move in the world in that way. So I think it's just all ass backwards, man. I really do. I'm kind of depressed about it.
I think it's a lot of misconceptions and assumptions. I mean, I can give you one really good example if we have a second.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot of misconceptions, and I think it's a lot of lying by people that have, not individuals, but by people that come from groups and ideologies that have their own agendas. I've used this example a lot. So if anybody's listened to my show, The Secret Teachings, they probably heard it. But I was at a farmer's market in the summer, and I heard these people kind of, not like an argument, but kind of a heated debate, but kind of agreeing with each other. And they were talking about the U.S. Congress, and they were talking about how it's not fair that Rhode Island has 2 senators and California also has 2 senators. And they were saying California should have more senators based on, because they have a bigger population. And I just stood there and listened to this. And I was thinking, okay, first of all, I don't think that these people ever went through a civics class, because this is like day one civics, why we have a bicameral legislature. But the point to my little story is, obviously every state has 2 senators because that's equal representation for states. And then every state has equal representation based on population for the House. And this was the main argument, one of the main arguments of the Constitutional Convention. And that's a really, really simple piece of history. But people, either because of ignorance or because they're really deceptive, they want to manipulate people clearly into thinking, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why does Rhode Island have 2 senators and California has 2 as well? Rhode Island should have less than California. And they don't give them the context of what that means or why that is. Same thing with the 3/5 compromise. Same thing with the Confederate Constitution, which is ignored, which it was written because the federal Constitution didn't allow for slavery. They don't teach or tell people any of that stuff. And it's not like it's a conspiracy. It's just people that don't like the idea of for Americans, like what America represents. So they try to pick it and try to unwind and try to unthread the whole thing. But I think it's not just, U.S. history. It's also just pretty much anything and everything. It could be UFOs. It could be whatever. If we don't have the context of something, and if we're not looking into the details of something, and we're not open to being objective, and we're not just concerned with our emotions or our echo chambers, we're never really going to understand anything. We're just going to allow
like that.
Yeah, we're just going to allow other people to think for us, and we're going to be whipped up into a frenzy. And that's not very independent thinking. But I guess more to the very specific point, when you're talking about independence and freedom, people misconceive what those things even are, what they represent. Like from an American point of view, independence is like literally just becoming independent from the crown. Right. It doesn't have anything to do with your independence to drink and drive, or your independence to, masturbate in public. It means independence from the crown. That's as simple as it is. Beyond that, it's a very complex subject, but we use those words because they sound good. And that stuff really frustrates me. But it applies to everything. It applies again to UFOs. It applies to the supernatural. It applies to everything. And that's, I think, in my opinion, that's what it means to be objective, is to realize that there's always another side to things. There's always another way to look at it. And people, when they tell stories like that and try to convince people why they should be upset about something, they're usually pretty dishonest about it.
It's always a breath of fresh air, man, to have you on, because we're going into the break here, but we were here with Ryan Gable from The Secret Teachings, in a world where I seem to be, and maybe you do too, surrounded by double standards, hypocrisy, lies, everything under the sun that you cannot trust. It's good. It's good to have Ryan Gable here. That's all I'm going to say about
thanks
that.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
We'll be right back. Back here live on the Fringe FM. I'm your host, Joe Rupert, here with Ryan Gable. And I see some people on the Telegram asking about is the show live? Is it not live? Here's how you tell if the show is live. All right. If you hear the lightning flash, you're listening to Lighting the Void radio, and you hear that drop, that means we're live. That's all I can tell you. All right. Because I got so much chaos going on in my life right now. We need your donations. We need your help, man. In order for me to upgrade this, I have to get a new PC. It has to happen. I've got all the peripherals, just the tower. That's all I need. One that can handle video streaming and gaming. We've been gaming. I've been talking about Fallout a lot lately. Right, Ryan? Been getting into that. And
oh, yeah.
Also wanted to mention that I was just on Ryan's show talking about the Kabbalah on Juan show, which should come out tomorrow on YouTube. And I think it's already out on the podcast. And I was also on Paranoid American's Paranoid, that show, and we did another one about AI programming where he was programming, like, it's crazy, Ryan. They can take your voice and program it and then just start typing stuff and it sounds like you. It's freaky.
Oh, I know. I did a show on it. I did a show on that a couple of months ago.
Really freaky.
It is there was a couple of college kids that invented something up in Canada where they could do that years ago. And now it's a pretty well researched technology. I suppose that there are probably military applications, especially, but a lot of scammers are using it to call people and pretend to be relatives and ask for money.
Really?
Oh yeah. That's been in local news here and other places. I've seen local news stories that were on the internet, but I know I talked about that years ago. And then there was that Canadian company, and now it's so well known that there are now warnings that people could be calling you in the voices of your relatives to ask for money or to ask for other things. And scams are getting very sophisticated.
Asking for, can you please give me some money? I'm your father that's so crazy, man.
Dad, I was in a car wreck. I need money now. That kind of thing.
Oh my God, dude. That's crazy. Well, the phone lines are open at 501-777-5631 if you want to talk to Ryan. I think we have a caller on the line from 707 area code. Who are we speaking with?
Oh, I know. I did a show.
Hey, Joe.
Hey, what's up, man? You might want to turn your radio down. It's going to it's delayed, so it's going to confuse you.
I didn't realize. I had the computer on, and then I called you, and then, anyway, it's good. It's great to hear you and Ryan doing shows again. I listened to Ryan's show. I recently found Ryan again on my Apple thing, and then
right.
I listened to the show you guys did on the Thanksgiving and the recent one you did on the Tree of Life. And,
that was a good show.
No, it was excellent. I think the Tree of Life show, what you're talking about with what's going on in society, I think that speaks to it. No one is taking the middle path anymore.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
No, it is. And when you look at original Christianity, as to the teachings of Christ, esoterically, it was called the way. It wasn't called being a Christian. It was a path towards self-enlightenment and development, and what you should do to be a compassionate and loving human being to evolve to whatever next spiritual level we're supposed to evolve to. But that's all getting lost. I mean, our society is doesn't even take the spiritual into account. All this, and Ryan does excellent breaking down science stuff, and all this scientism. It's looking at problems or looking at things through a very myopic. It's not natural, because our interaction, we are nature. Humans are nature. All around us is nature. You can't just look at like Occam's razor and say, well, all things being equal, well, it doesn't exist. It's all one. It's a very complex system, and we have limited understanding developed that comes to us through our development of consciousness. And I like the quote from Manly P. Hall that says, one can only understand what they have the capacity to understand.
Right, yeah. So this is where empathy comes into play, right? Because if someone doesn't understand something that you're talking about or a concept that you're talking about, there's always a way to try to explain it to them or empathize why they're not there yet. It doesn't mean, well, this person's not serving me anymore, or this person's not on my level, or whatever, and I'm just going to get away from it. That's not, I mean, there is, to me, a way to protect your energy, so to speak, that you should do. But I don't like the way is to spread your message, to connect with others and keep moving, keep growing, keep doing that. And, Ryan and I have never had, I've had a lot of blowouts with people in my life for certain reasons or the other, but I never have had that with Ryan. And I don't understand why. Ryan has issues with certain things in his life, because I've never gotten anything but the truth from Ryan. I've never gotten anything but his authenticity and who he really is. And it seems to me that the more authentic we become, the more empathetic we become, the more we try to love others and give others or ourselves, the more, I think maybe that's the way it's supposed to be, but I think maybe that's why people are afraid to do it, because I'm so tired. This is what you hear them say. And I'd like to hear the caller's thoughts on this, and Ryan's too. I'm so tired of being taken advantage of. You understand what I'm saying? That's, people become tired of it.
Well, I think there also has to come a point where you have to accept, as an individual, we have a consciousness, and then there's also the consciousness of the collective. But I have to look at my power to influence the conscious of the collective, is to develop my consciousness and empathy and compassion to the best extent that I can. And in that it's like what Gandhi said, become the change you want to see, right?
Right.
And if I work towards that, then there's one less asshole in the world, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
No, I mean, it's that simple. If I try to be kind, like I'm driving and, okay, I can be rushing around and, I could let this person pull out in front of me and go, or I could be an asshole or not, you know. Well, I have the right to do this and that. And you have to look beyond that. You have to cooperate and just be compassionate and love. And I think what you said about love is, I think, love is I think we're only understanding the rudimentary, magical, or whatever this is about, because it's far-reaching and it's a creative process. And it's a coming together of the. I think love is, to me, what I've intuited, is that it's the coming together of the opposites. It's forming the middle path.
Right.
It's bringing things into balance and harmony, elegance, grace, harmony, and balance.
Thoughts on that, Ryan?
I have maybe a slightly different interpretation of the person pulling out in front of me story. If I'm going to go out in public and have an interaction like that, I don't see it as a personal duty, but I see it as a societal duty to not let, like if someone's trying to cut me in line at the store, which happens quite often and quite brazenly, rather than sitting there quietly and allowing them to cut me, I feel like that allows that person to feel like they can walk all over other people and do whatever they want with no consequence. So I have a pretty good verbal dressing down of that person and tell them to get to the back of the line, or they can cut the next person who's too weak to say anything about it. I don't see that as a personal thing. Like, I'm not a hero. I'm just, as a societal thing.
I think that
you have to stand up to people, or the world becomes a much worse place.
Sure. Absolutely.
Well, maybe I don't think that isn't, that's totally not what I meant. I meant, let's say I'm driving and I'm coming up to the stoplight. There's a long line, and there's someone waiting at the intersection, and I can stop before that and let them pull ahead of me before the light changes.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what I mean by that. No, I believe love is also having. Love, I think, also fosters our courage, is what Ryan's talking about. And we need to call out this BS that's going on, where people are trying to do evil stuff or not appropriate stuff in society. And no one does that anymore. I mean,
I think that has a lot to do with fear, honestly. So in the tree or in the pattern of the trestle board, it teaches us that, unbalanced mercy is evil. Unchecked evil is evil, right? And too much mercy is weakness, right? So love, in a sense, is being balanced, right? You have to be, and this is where I want to go back to the polar ideas of the masculine and feminine, right? There's far too many men out there, and I've been one of them in my life too, and I've learned this lesson, is that if you actually believe and stand for something, it doesn't mean that you can't forgive. You can forgive, right? But you have to stand your ground about certain things. If you don't want something, you have to act upon it and mean it. If you don't want something in your life, or you want something in your life as a masculine energy, you have to mean those things. You can't just say, well, this is what I want and this is what I need. This is what I mean. But I'm too afraid to put that severity arm down, that sword down. I'm too afraid, because then I'll be alone, or I won't even have a little bit of this or whatever. And that's not really love. We're not, it's kind of like the mother and the father thing. You know, your mother was there to comfort you and baby you and do all these things and help you with your self-esteem. Your father was there to teach you about things that were kind of, and I know this sounds super traditional, but things that weren't so great in the world, and, you know, how to be a man in a certain sense. And I know that sounds traditional, and I'm not an old school traditional guy by any ways, but there's some real natural stuff going on there. Like what the caller's saying, there's a nature to it that should be happening, you know?
Yeah, no, it's a balancing of the masculine and feminine, sacred masculine and sacred feminine create the sacred child, or the apex of the triangle, right? Or the trinity.
Right. Yeah, and people say, well, I hear a lot of people say, well, if that's the case, how come my ex is such a bitch, or she's so toxic, or she's a cheater, or he's a cheater, that we had a child together? Well, it doesn't really matter, like, at the point of, who these people are, what they did to you at that time, or what. The point is when that conception happened, there's a high chance that there was love happening, whether it was you really knew it or not, you know. And that energy's always been a symbol of it. It's supposed to be sacred. But on the other hand, Ryan could probably talk about this. Back in the day, if a woman was raped and she had a baby, they would call her a liar and say, well, you can't have babies if you weren't in love, right? So then they would hang them for that stuff. It's pretty crazy.
And that's where like you're talking earlier about, I think there comes a point where you develop your consciousness, or if you want to expand your consciousness, you have to look at all your beliefs. Where did I get this belief? Is this a societal thing? Is it a parent thing? Is it? And then you, at least for me, I question, well, okay, why am I acting this way? Or if someone's upsetting me, it has more to do with me a lot of times, my belief systems and my expectations. And that's where compassion comes in. And then I also have to look at people like the Manly P. Hall quote. I can get very frustrated with people and start to go off, and then I realize, they probably are so they have no idea what they're even doing. Yeah. They're like the United States of Zombieland, I've heard a quote before, And this is being fostered by a lot of mass media and stuff. And I'm not saying all of it, but I don't know. It's just craziness to me. Yeah, well, and Joe, this is Edward, by the way.
Yeah, I know. What's up, brother?
Okay.
Yeah, I know.
There you go.
It's good to hear your voice, man. Thanks for calling in.
Yeah, no, it's good to. Like I said,
thank you for calling.
No, I've always appreciated your show, Ryan, and you're very informative, and I'm glad I found you again. And yeah, you're a great researcher, and I learn a lot from you. And Joe, when you do your own shows, like where you're just talking, you should give yourself credit. You're very knowledgeable, and I learn a lot from you as well. So,
thanks, man. Thanks for your call. I appreciate you saying that.
No, I appreciate what you guys are doing. Thank you.
You have a good night. That's cool. There goes Edward. He's a good dude, man. So yeah, I don't know what your thoughts on that are, Ryan, but like, that's kind of like when you did that show on the tree, like these symbols, whether they're the elemental symbols, like in the fifth element, or the aspects between good and evil, masculine and feminine. You ever notice how lots of movies are always love stories? Even Rocky, it's like the hero's journey, but it's really like a love story. Even Sylvester Stallone told people that. Like he said, it was really a love story. It wasn't meant to be like an action movie of the hero's journey. It just turns out that those things go together. And you see this play happening in all movies and stuff. And it doesn't mean that it's a freaking Illuminati. Like I was playing Fallout the other night on YouTube, and I don't know if you were watching because I saw you chatting in there.
I watched one of them that you did. Yes.
The Mothman thing, right? And I was like, they put cultists in the game that worship the Mothman. And I said, this is what people think ceremonial magic is, right? And they had all these crazy,
I did see that part. Yeah. I saw that.
And I'm sure there are things like that in the world, but usually those are misguided teenagers that hate their parents and are digging up graves for the most part, But I don't know where I'm getting with this, but I just think a lot of things are still misunderstood, misconceived, and I don't want us, especially when things are the hardest, because it's hard for everybody right now, to lose our connection to what we've learned before all this happened, to what we learned while it was happening, because we can still change things if we want to. I feel like Samwise and the Lord of the Rings talking to Frodo,
We can change things, but that doesn't necessarily mean what we change is going to give us the results that we want or need.
They're still good in this world, and it's still worth fighting for.
Mr. Frodo, yeah. Well, Lord of the Rings is a great example of probably one of the most classic hero's journeys stories ever told. But those types of things, like when we talked about the Kabbalah on the Secret Teachings last Friday, it's been a week already since we did that show. When we talked about the Kabbalah, I got a really good response from the audience, and I don't know why I felt maybe intuitively that I wanted to do that show with you, because we haven't done a show for so long, and I just felt I need to do a Kabbalah show. And I got a really great response out of people. And it's probably because some people told me directly, other people, I'm assuming, people that message me, that is, I don't think that a lot of people have much of an idea of what the Kabbalah is. It's either this mystical Jewish thing or it's some kind of evil satanic thing. And when you sat down and just explained what it was and what it represents, I think that I know that resonated with a lot of listeners. And that's really that's what my show is all about, is trying to find resonance with people and trying to show that I don't like using the word truth, but there's some sort of relevancy to most viewpoints, especially the extremist viewpoints. There's relevancy to both sides, but extremities blind our judgment and blind our ability to see things objectively because they're in the extreme. That's what my show's all about. That's who I, as a person, try to be. And I'm pretty sure that's
always took a very
your show
objective
is.
Journalistic approach to what you're doing. That's why I've always admired it. A very objective journalistic approach.
I appreciate that. And your show too. We've done radio for a very long time together, and you're just open to talking to whoever and just trying to figure out what other people think and what other people see. And there's plenty of really good radio shows and podcasts like that. And there's a lot of really great people that do. They write books, but then there's those kinds of people don't get the same kind of attention that some of the unnamed people get. And it's all, most of that stuff is like when you're looking at the mainstream media, alternative media, independent media, and then like the alternative podcast radio community, everybody's trying to sell something. And it's like kind of ironic, because when I've noticed that, I've kind of crafted my show to be that what I'm selling is that I'm not selling anything, if that makes sense.
You sell
at least ideologies.
You sell it's okay to sell stuff. What I think, whether it's your books, your T-shirts, your donations, even your time, if people need your help, right? It's okay. I don't have any qualms about that. What I have qualms about is the methods.
I'm talking about ideology.
Yeah,
I'm talking
the
about
methods
selling
that
an idea.
Like I was talking to Owen Wilson about this today, man. There are systems that are set in place. I'll give you an example. Owen Hunt. Owen Wilson's a comedian. So Owen Hunt, a friend of mine, did a show with I forget her name, but she used to be a sex worker. And she talked about how the systems that are in play, especially like metaphysical coaches and all of this other stuff, a lot of them are set up like way better than sex workers were. So there are systems in play that try to get you to buy things off of your trauma, right? So they're trying to, whatever your trauma is, they can fix it. And then they have upsells and downsells and ways of getting your information. And there's so many people that want to be like autonomous. There's programs out there that are just raking people over the coals for money because people cannot figure out how to be autonomous. And what they teach in those things, you could learn in a 30-minute YouTube video about marketing, right? I don't think it's the selling of things. I honestly think it's the way, the manipulative methods, right? You know, kind of like, are you talking about what, David, what's his face, and all these other people that are selling these stories that are making them tons of money, man. You know, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, I think I'd find value in honest, truthful things. Right. So if I would to donate to you or buy your book or your t-shirt, Ryan, to me, I would be fulfilled, and so would you. But if you have, you know, manipulative tactics to get that money out of me, or maybe to get more or whatever, you know, then that's a whole different thing. Right.
Yeah. And again, just to clarify, I wasn't talking about selling stuff. I don't even sell t-shirts anymore, but more so like selling an idea. You're of one certain political, religious, or
right.
some side, some group that you want to try to promote and sell. And I get tired of that, but that's a whole other story. Like within the field of what I and what you do. Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like that's a whole other subject, but I plan on doing a show about that. Hopefully, I really probably going to piss a lot of people off, but I've seen personal friends of mine, even exes and other people that have gotten raked over the coals monetarily for people taking advantage of their traumas, like, or their deepest dreams and desires, right? That's not really, unless you're actually helping people achieve these things instead of how much money can I milk out of this person. It's a whole other thing, dude. Like, I got out of sales a long time ago because I saw that the world worked that way. And yes, it's a skill set, and yes, it's good to understand it. And yes, everything is a sale, but not everything has to be a sale. Not everything. I don't believe that at all.
And selling isn't always bad anyway, like you're referring to. It's something that, like, it's not about being sold to clarify. It's about people making things up to extract energy and resources out of others in a malicious manner.
I'll tell you something else that's happened to me that's really pissed me off, just because I love talking about these things with you, Ryan. You know, so I was told that over the past few years that I had a problem accepting help from others. Well, you just have a problem because your childhood, because you were guilted all the time. And I'm okay. So I started to learn to accept help. People say, I just want to help you. They'd come to me. I just want to help you. I just want to help you. I just want to help you. Okay. Well, here's how I need help. They wouldn't help me the way I needed help, but they would just throw money at me or kind of start to do things and then run off because they're afraid they're going to have to do some work or something. Right. So I started to get, I was like, well, this is why I don't ask for help. And then even with the donations and certain things, there were certain people saying, well, you're just out here manipulating people for their money. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about, man? So for the first, and it wasn't even a different person. It's like the same person that's telling you you have a problem accepting help and then gaslighting you after you accept the help. Like you're some type of manipulative genius that's out to take everybody's dollar. Dude, I live in a shack, man. You know what I mean?
This is why
I don't want to hear it.
That's why I don't accept help. But I'm a different kind of a person, though.
I get it now. I totally get it. I get why people say that. No, I just don't do it. You know, I'm just going to be blatantly honest with you, brother. I'm a bit naive about a lot of things. If you can't tell,
you think that you're naive. I think that I don't want to say the opposite of naive. I'm just more unwilling to believe that anybody's telling the truth ever. I gotta have that proven to me before I can believe people.
Well, I hope you trust me, man. Yeah, I hope you do.
We've known each other for a real long time, so that's different. But if someone messaged me and was like, "Oh, I want to help you with your show," like I normally don't trust those people or respond back to them. because I don't trust that they're honest. I trust that they're honest. I just don't believe that is a personal trust issue with me. That's something that I got to work on. But when you've been burned so many times, you just don't trust anybody anymore, so that's a personal thing though.
I think that's what it boils down to, like the move. So do this. Maybe would you say it would be worth trying? Like if you want to create something, people give up on love. They give up on their dreams. They give up on creations because they've been burned so many times, but I still feel perseverance wins at the end of the day, no matter how long it takes you to get there. So maybe we should try to implement some of these archetypes in our life. Do you think that could help us? Like, didn't it help you at some point in time? I thought I kind of helped you with that, but maybe I didn't.
I think you helped. I don't think that I implemented correctly, or I don't think that I don't think that the outcome was preferable.
It didn't end the way you expected it to, right?
Expected it to, or, hoped it would. So I suppose you could look at it from expect or hope, two different kind of things. But I don't, it's interesting that I don't apply. Like people ask me, do you practice magic? Are you a ceremonial magician? And I tell them, no, I'm not. I'm more of a scholar. I understand that there is incredible power in those things. To some degree, if you were to look at my radio studio, I'm surrounded by symbols and I'm surrounded by things that mean something to me on a deep level. Like I have an understanding of what they mean historically, or what they mean to a certain group, or what they mean in a contemporary sense, like certain symbols, certain images, things like that. Like my whole radio studio is surrounded by that. But so I guess that kind of makes me a practicing magician in the sense, and we all practice magic. Every time we say hello, have a nice day, all that's really magic in some form by some definition. But I'm more of a scholarly magician in the sense that I just like to learn about things and quantify things and catalog things. That's my personality. It's much more straight. As I've gotten to know you over the years, you're much more fluid in your personality, and you're more.
I got to experience it, man. I do love the scholarly side of things, though.
And I like the practical side of things, but that's more you. You're more practical about it. I'm more scholarly about it. It doesn't make one of us right or wrong. That's just how we see the world. And I'm sure that there are many listeners who feel that they feel more comfortable in one category or the other. But I know that if I was to implement certain ceremonial things, I feel like that would produce better results for me. But I have a block there that says don't do that. So I just don't do it. I don't know what that is, but I just don't do it.
Well, this is why I always give people advice. Like when they ask me about that, like, what ritual should I do? I'm like, well, what do you want? Well, I want.
Yeah, and there isn't a simple thing to do to get what you want.
They'll say, well, I want. What did they say, Ryan? I want to find my person, or I want this. I'm like, okay, well, turn your life into a ritual that will welcome that energy in and let it go. Right. Like the symbols in your house, everything around you, everything that you do, turn it into a ceremony or a ritual that will bring those things into your life. You don't have to draw a circle and chant divine names by any means,
See, I see that as, I know that it's not, but my perspective is that that's manipulative on some deep level. So that's why I don't do it. I'm wondering what your perspective is on that, because I know that it's not, but.
No, I don't think it's manipulative. I think when it comes down to it, I don't want someone to put up a square on their wall when they deeply want a circle. Right. Mm-hmm. I know this is a simple analogy, but if you really deeply desire a circle in your heart, draw a circle. Make circles everywhere that you can see them. Celebrate circles. Right. So all I'm trying to do is help people become more of what they say they want, not to manipulate something, so to speak.
Sure.
Because the unconscious, what we're doing right now is just a conscious thing, but the unconscious is very deep. The soul is a very deep thing. It wants to experience all this stuff. And if you don't think that, just give somebody some salvia and watch them drool on themselves, right? The soul is still there, but they can't express or do anything. You know what I mean? Like that's all the consciousness is the ability to interact with what's around you, you know, or your level of that ability. I think
we do that more than we know. Like everything and our entire lives, everything we do is the interacting of and with consciousness. But that, you know, this whole conversation sounds probably pretty, what would the word be? Sounds pretty general and pretty supernatural, or I don't know. That's kind of how I'm interpreting it.
Sure,
but
I'm enjoying it.
A lot of times when you and I have done shows together, this is almost like a therapy session that hopefully helps other people see that people like us also aren't perfect and have issues that we work through, and that's better.
No, dude, so you said something about communication earlier, right? I find that if I had even 3 other or 4 other people in my life like you, Ryan, and I'm not just blowing smoke, if I just had them in my life, I'd be extremely blessed. Because the ultimate form of communication is your truth. Now, just because some people can't handle it or they don't know how to react to it doesn't mean that you're a bad communicator. It means they need to get to their truth to get to your level. So you're on a different level of communication, which may be why you don't relate to others the way you wish that you could, I think, because the way you communicate to me is very conscious. And the first place that you get to that level is honesty, truth, and authenticity. And it doesn't mean you're never going to lie, but if you lie, you know you've broken a communication barrier, and it probably, like for me, it's going to feel like shit, right? So I don't have that many people in my life that say, this is what I want, this is who I am, this is what I deeply desire, and this is the way things are going to be, and they are that thing. But you are. So don't ever downplay that, man. It may be hard to find your group or your circle of people, but if you can find them like I have with you, it's a very big blessing, man.
No, I understand that. I agree with you.
It is hard.
It's a matter. Yeah, it's a matter of trying not to become bitter about it as you get older.
I remember even going on a show with you once where we talked to some of other podcasters, like-minded podcasters.
Was that the one that I got in a fight with a bunch of people?
Yeah, like Jay Dyer and all these other. So,
let's do that.
Yeah, so I could tell immediately the people that were closed-minded or weren't even open to discussion. They were just there to push what they think about the subject and move on. Right?
Yes.
There was no discussion per se. And yet the moment any truth came out, there were people there that loved it, that reacted to it, that conversated, people in the chat. There were those type of people, because I have other people in mind. But there were a few others that just, you know, they weren't having it. And if they couldn't respond to what you were saying, they would just try to cut you down because they can't really respond to what you're saying. So instead of doing that, they're going to try to insult you. Yeah,
Jay Dyer. I remember that interview. There was two other people on there. It was just, I remember that was about the Christian cross. And I just made a reference to the cross having another meaning. And then their Christian egos came out and tried to crucify me. Yeah. And I thought
Which is kind of ironic,
funny.
Right? Because you're talking about the cross that you bear. Well, you had to bear yours right there, didn't you?
Yeah. See, that kind of stuff doesn't bother me though. I think that kind of stuff is really funny. So I'm just like, people listen to, I mean, I don't have a beef with Jay Dyer. I'm just saying people listen to him and people listen to others like him. And there's that Christian angle, which that's fine if you got a Christian angle. But when you're not willing to listen or hear other sides of things or other points of view, that is, in my opinion, that's where the problem begins.
That was the first time I ever had anybody just blatantly say, well, if magic is real or this, like, what have you produced as far as created in your life? And they were like trying to insult me because I wasn't rich or something. And I've gotten to travel all over the United States. I created a radio station that I deeply loved. I did everything in my childlike heart that I wanted to do. I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
It's super it's super ironic because that's actually kind of like the temptation of Jesus in the Bible. Well, if you're really the Son of God, then turn this stone into bread. If you're really the Son of God, jump off this rock and fly and live. Well, if magic really has helped you, or this has really helped you, and you're not a Christian, but if this stuff's really helped you, then prove it to me. It's very, very demonic. I can't stand people like that. That's why I don't get along with the alternative media hacks, because they're almost all of them are like that. I either got to deal with atheist, blue-haired, obese, liberal, crazy, psycho aborters of children, or I got to deal with super conservative, right-wing Christian wasps. And I can't get along with either one of them. And then I find there's a lot of really great people who listen to my show that are kind of in the middle, and that's where my people are.
Whoa, dude. Christian wasp, that's a new one. What is that referring to?
You don't know about wasps, like the real rich conservative people that kind of just, they're just like
I've been around those people. Those people just like to hear themselves talk, and I'm not saying all of them, but the ones I've been around are extremely messed up deep down, on a perverse level. Yet they're around preaching conservatism. There are some that I know here in my community. They're good people, like my uncle, but I've personally been around like super rich or people that kind of want to hold that image and preach conservatism. Meanwhile, they got super demented stuff going on in their own lives, you know.
There's nothing wrong with any of that stuff. It's just when people become part of some larger, almost like a cult, and you can't question the beliefs. It doesn't matter what it is. Christianity, atheism is a cult as far as I'm concerned, but cults aren't necessarily bad. Like, I don't have nothing against atheists. I don't have anything against Christians. I don't have anything against Mormons or Jews or Muslims or anybody else. As a matter of fact, going back to what the caller said earlier, this always creates a conflict with a handful of my listeners when I bring it up. So I'm sure that there's probably somebody listening to your show who won't like this, but I've read the Quran. Ooh, it's big and bad and scary.
Well, that's a good book, man.
The Quran is a very good book. It's not the book of infidels. That's a really idiotic and stupid and really retarded thing to say.
What is the Bible? The book of Gentiles? Like, never mind. Keep going.
Well, no, so the Quran is just, the Quran actually has references to, the Muslims believe what the Christians believe, with the only exception being that they don't think Jesus was the Son of God. They think that the Christian, or what became Christianity as we know it today, that the institution of Christianity, they created that image to give themselves more leverage against other religions. The Jews and the Muslims both agree on that, but for some reason the Christians have this hard-on, 4-hour erection for Israel, but they hate Muslims, even though the Muslims actually have more in common with the Christians.
That's always been weird to me.
It's very bizarre, dude. But the point is the point is, if you look at the Quran explicitly says that Allah, which is just the Arabic for God, is the way, and God or Allah will show the way. The same references in the Quran as it is the Bible. There's even the Quran has a book of Mary. The Quran has references to all the biblical characters. The Quran is just like the Bible. It's just another perspective. And then and this is a whole nother issue, Joe, but like you get people like, whoa, so what are you saying? Like, it's okay that Muhammad had sex with that 6-year-old girl? It's like, well, where are you getting that idea from? Where is that? That's just like that anti-Muslim propaganda. That's not what Muslims believe. I asked a Muslim friend of mine. She said, what a joke. Who told you that? And it's the same thing, I'm sure, that the Muslims are told about the Christians. And it's the same thing, the Americans were told about the Germans and the Japanese, and the same thing the Japanese were told about the Americans. And it's so ridiculous. That's actually what my show is on tonight, here in about an hour. My show is going to be on Pearl Harbor, because I don't know if you want to talk about this for a second, but today's the anniversary of Pearl Harbor. And I read this USA Today article. I'll try to bring this around full circle, but I read this USA Today article that said, Pearl Harbor, 1941, December 7th, a day that the Japanese engaged in a surprise attack against American Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor. And I was thinking, is it 2023 and they're still saying that it was a surprise attack? Yeah. We've known for decades that Roosevelt, not only did Roosevelt know, the Secretary of War Stimson wrote in his diary how they could get the Japanese to attack so they could justify entering into World War II. And we've seen this with the Gulf of Tonkin incident. We saw this with babies in incubators. We saw this in 9/11. We see this now with Ukraine and Russia, all the fake stories out of Ukraine, the Snake Island stories made up, the Ghost of Kiev's made up, the bombing of the Holocaust memorials made up, according to even Jewish groups. And then the USA Today article, there's a New York Times article that came out that showed that they were saying that Israel fully knew about the attack from Hamas, stood down, let it happen, and even engaged in insider trading before the attack happened, just like on 9/11 with all the airlines.
I mean, I wouldn't doubt it. This stuff's been happening so long now. They've got it down to a science,
Yes, and it's all based, again, back to the reason I bring this up is because it's all based on like this hatred of other groups. Like, I don't like and support the state of Israel. That doesn't mean I hate Jews. I don't know what that means. You're a really retarded person if you say that, and you're really, really stupid and ignorant. And I can't stand that kind of thing. It doesn't make any sense. I don't like it also when people say, well, I hate Hamas and I love Israel. It's like, do you even know what Hamas is? Do you know who created Hamas? Most people don't know anything about anything. They just do whatever the media tells them, whatever is cool within their own group. It doesn't make me a good person, Joe, but it's this hatred.
That goes back to what I was talking about before, when it comes to what individuality and all these different things people claim that we try to be. I just don't think people... Most of these, let me put it to this, most of these people that are telling you this stuff, that are giving you opinions about stuff they're not even living over there, like if your baby's not getting bombed on either side, I don't really want to hear you anyways, right? Like, I don't care. And then secondly, like, most of these people that are giving their opinions are only taking their opinions from the media or there's other people that they like or validate them or what makes them feel good, and yet they still can't get over the damage their mommy and daddies did to them. Or they still can't get past what, their neighbors think about them or whatever the hell it is. So I don't even listen to that stuff. Now if a person lived over there, either on Hamas or Israel side, they experience that stuff and they come tell me this is the truth. This is what happened to me. I want to hear it,
Mm-hmm. Well, and again, the reason I bring this up is because it's just, there are a lot of people that lived through the Cold War who still hate Russia. And there's a lot of people that hate Russia for other reasons today. And then there's people that hate Ukraine. And then there's people that hate, Israel. And there's people that hate Palestinians. And there's people that hate Jews and people that hate Muslims. And it's like, I don't even know why do we hate each other so much? It's because of back to the programming at the beginning of the show. It's based on the programming, the things that we're taught.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's a giant conspiracy. I don't think it's a giant conspiracy. It's just like, well, that's what your parents knew. It's what your grandparents knew. Like if your grandpa, uncle, whatever fought in World War II, it's a good chance that they probably didn't like Germans, and it's a good chance they probably didn't like Japanese, and the good chance they didn't like Italians, and and so on and so forth. And then likewise, if you go to I don't know about Germany, but I would assume that there are plenty of older Germans that probably feel the same way about Americans. Who knows? It's everything that we discuss and everything we talk about is boiled down to the false dilemma, the dichotomy, the fallacy of I'm on this side, I'm on that side. And that, in my opinion, that's because we can't accept who we are as individuals. So we have to project ourselves onto a group where if we do get attacked, at least the group is there to defend us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't like, I have a hard time. I don't know, man. I have a hard time listening to any of that stuff. I don't get too political. When I see it, I think it's crazy. It's bad. It's awful that stuff is happening. I know there's dark stuff going on, but to hear just when people jump to polarity about it, or I see these signs, I'll stand with Israel. I'm like, you guys are morons, man. Right? Like, to me, you're morons, because both Israeli children and Muslim children and women and families, and they're all destroying each other over a story that you don't even understand. And yet you still can't get over the trauma that your parents did to you. You still can't not stand what your neighbors think about you or whatever it is, where like you have no business even preaching to people about it.
Mm-hmm.
It pisses me off.
We preach about it because it makes us sound like we're informed. It makes us sound like we're taking a stance for the innocent. Right. And then really what it is it's a patronizing and arrogant and very selfish way to project yourself publicly. It makes you look maybe like you're smart, you're part of a group and you're informed, when you're really just repeating what major special interests want you to repeat.
Well, I'm glad that we have you out there, Ryan, and thanks for coming on the show, because I know you always do give your opinions and thoughts on things, but you also take a very journalistic and objective approach to everything, and I think we need more of that, man. And
I appreciate that. I'm trying not not to take the Gary Webb approach, which means that I'm planning to not shoot myself in the head twice with a shotgun for exposing something about the government. I'm going to try not to kill myself with a shotgun twice to the back of my head. So.
There you go. And like I say, man, when most people are saying, did you see what happened? And so-and-so, you're burying your head in the sand. I'm like, I was actually happy that Lego's Fortnite came out. That's what I was looking at today, you know.
There's a good balance between the two. Like I do my show and I'll play some Fallout, you know, or
right.
There's just, you got to have a balance between those things.
So your show comes on in less than an hour in Ground Zero Radio. I love hearing your voice on the Fringe, man. I love you always have a home here, always, man. And I know that you're going to go on and do bigger things than even what you're doing now. So just keep it up, bro.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yep. 1 hour, groundzero.radio, or, you know, actually all my shows, including the show you and I did, are on my website. There's an embed player and there's an RSS feed. The show we did was called Lighting the Kabbalah Christmas Tree. And if you go to the secretteachings.info, go to the free archive, you'll find it. It should be right at the top. Just scroll down through this week's shows and you'll see it'll say with Joe Roop, Lighting the Kabbalah Christmas Tree. You can listen and download it for free.
And your book, that new book, can you just give the premise and how they can get that book again?
Yeah. So there's two of them, actually. There's Liberty Shrugged, which I wrote earlier this year. Then there's Garden of Hallucinations, which just came out. So Liberty Shrugged is sort of an unconventional look at American history. It's not politically left or right. It takes things that are very well documented, including like physical documents, like scanned documents, etc., and looks at them and breaks them down and shows, like, for example, a lot of these myths, like the U.S. Constitution is a racist document. Well, actually, the Confederacy wrote their own Constitution because the federal Constitution was not a racist document. And if you read the Confederate Constitution, it explicitly says that race would be the justifying factor in preserving what they called, quote unquote, Negro slavery in the southern states. Also, how a lot of the South actually rejected the Confederacy. There's a famous story about that. A guy named Knight that they made a movie about with Matthew McConaughey, Free State of Jones. But a lot of places actually seceded from the Confederacy. There's a lot of things in the book like that are really, I think they're really interesting and they're sort of unconventional. And then Garden of Hallucinations, it covers the origin of a lot of words, like the power of words. And I also talk about the Garden of Eden as a hallucinatory experience, different substances, ayahuasca, peyote, DMT, blue water lily, poppy, things like that. And then I have an analysis in that book of the mysteries, the secret teachings of the body, and take a look at these different religious texts like the Zendavesta, the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, and talk about the differences between magic and miracle. And you can get both of those books on the website.
Y'all check it out, thesecretteachings.info. Thanks again, Ryan. Good night, y'all. Sweet dreams.
Yeah, you got it. Thank you.